Yep.
1 minute, okay? Yeah?
Yep.
So this is the last formal session of our 2-week Summer Institute dealing with critical anti-Semitism studies. So for the new people here, welcome and thank you for coming. As you know, I'm sitting with two giants. I'm humbled to be sitting with both Dr. Benjamin Chavis and Natan Sharansky. I'll introduce them briefly. They're going to be speaking. The name of this session is A Tale of Two Movements, Civil Rights, Soviet Jewry, and the Ongoing Struggle Against Hatred. Dr. Chavis is actually now on the faculty of ISGAP. He's also not at such another institution that's not as prestigious as ISGAP, called Duke University. He's also a professor there. He's very much engaged in African American and Jewish relations and solidarity. I came to know him through Senator Lieberman and a colleague of Senator Lieberman and the fine work that they were doing together. Dr. Chavis is a former head of the NAACP and a civil rights activist. He is very close to Dr. Martin Luther King. Some of you may have heard of the Wilmington 10. It was a horrible part of the civil rights struggle where people were falsely imprisoned. Dr. Chavis was actually sentenced to 34 years in prison, served 7, and then was exonerated, and the sentence is overturned. While he was in prison, he received a master's degree from Duke University from the School of Divinity. So he has a special place in their history and in the history of the civil rights movement. Natan Sharansky, as many of you know here, he's the chair of ISGAP, which is a profound honor for us at ISGAP. He was the voice of the Refusnik movement, a movement that demanded dignity in the Soviet Union to live freely as Jewish people, to be able to practice their Jewish culture and to emigrate to Israel if they decided or if they wanted to. And as many of you know, the Soviet Jews, the Refusniks, the people who demanded this sort of basic human decent respect, were imprisoned, had to go underground, lost their jobs. In the Soviet Union at the time, if you weren't working, you were considered a parasite, and that led to incarceration. It was a very difficult time. Natan spent 9 years in the Soviet Gulag. He was on hunger strikes. They were both of these gentlemen were on hunger strikes. He was finally released and made Aliyah to Israel as a free Jewish man. And really, his freedom, his release really encaptured the entire Jewish world. It was really something that resonated profoundly for the Jewish people in Israel and in the diaspora. He served 9 years in the Israeli government in various positions, and then 9 years in the Sachnut, so which is not bad for us. We have another 6 or 7 years to go at ISGAP, so that's right. So it's really an honor for both of them to be here. And I will say, as a scholar, I'm just going to stay for a moment, it's especially grateful to be in the presence of these two heroes. I was raised by parents that really taught my sister and I the value of human dignity, of standing up as a proud Jewish person, and also standing up for the rights of other people. And they really gave us a serious education in aspects of civil rights. We were very aware of the condition of African Americans as children, visiting family in the United States from Canada. And they were also at the forefront. I used to go for Soviet Jewry demonstrations with my grandparents and their friends, and my parents and their friends, and my sister and our friends. So very much committed to human rights. So, and I was the the chairperson of the student struggle for Soviet Jewry in Canada. And as a kid, a naive kid with not too much fear, I spent 3.5 weeks in Moscow and Leningrad at the time with a friend, Stephen Singerman, visiting the Refusnik community and bringing them messages from outside and assistance, and then bringing back messages. And at the time, I had the amazing fortune to meet many refuseniks, including Natan's brother and mother, who came in. They were in internal exile, came in to meet us in Moscow. And then I was also, I think from that experience, ended up being very active in the anti-apartheid movement. I became the chairperson of the African National Congress Solidarity Committee and went to South Africa as well, and was sort of involved in that struggle in the 80s and 90s. So to sit with these two incredible people, it's really a special honor. So on that note, I will turn the microphone on to you, Dr. Chavis.
Thank you. God answers prayers, but you have to pray. And so being here at ISGAP Summer Institute over the last 2 weeks has been a great honor, a great privilege, and I would say somewhat a great responsibility. Because after this Summer Institute, we have to go back to our places to make sure that we not only challenge anti-Semitism, challenge anti-Zionism, but to end it, to stop it, to put it down. I sit between two. I think Charles is being very modest. Before I really get into what I want to say, I think we should all give Dr. Charles Small a round of applause for this great Summer Institute. And all of the staff who worked so hard to make this possible. Sitting next to my brother here, and I don't use the term brother as casual identification. We became brothers in the 1970s while we both were in prison. I became a refusenick. He became a champion of civil rights. What we discovered was that our struggles were reflective of one movement for freedom, one movement for justice, one movement for equality. Some people think that anti-Semitism will be ended if the Jewish people stand up stronger. I think anti-Semitism will be ended when the whole world stands up and demand that this evil be stopped, be challenged. I got inspired by, well, I knew him then as Anatoly Sharansky. When I read about what he was doing in the Soviet jail, prison, I said, I better get busy and start writing also. And I wrote a letter to my brother Sharansky on September 4th, 1978. The prison authorities in Moscow refused to give him the letter. And I was working with Tish Brazil, my trusted associate in the Black Jewish Action Alliance. I found at the bottom of a pasteboard box a 50-year-old letter. And he never got a chance to receive it, so part of my address, if you don't mind, I'm going to read him the letter that I sent him 50 years ago. And I would like to share, with your permission, Natan, the letter with everybody just as a tidbit of remembrance of this day. McCain State Prison, McCain, North Carolina, September 4th, 1978. Dear Anatoly B. Sharansky, please receive this letter out of my utmost respect for you and the global cause for freedom, justice, and equality. Anti-Semitism is an outrage to humanity. Racism and anti-Semitism are crimes against humanity. As you have now been unjustly sentenced to 13 years imprisonment in Moscow I welcome you to the International Fraternity of Prisoners of Conscience, who all are political prisoners. I am currently unjustly serving a 34-year prison sentence in the United States of America as a member of the Wilmington 10 in my home state of North Carolina. I have read with great admiration of your courage and commitment to end the treacherous treatment and oppression of Jews in the Soviet Union. The religious, ethnic, social, and political discrimination against Jews and the persecution of Jewish families and communities are evil affronts to the love and grace of God. Likewise, the racial, ethnic, social, and political discrimination against and persecution of African Americans, families, and communities are also affronts to the evil affronts to the love and grace of God. I pray for your freedom and liberation. I extend to you on behalf of my colleagues who are political prisoners in America and known as the Wilmington 10, our profound solidarity to you and to all of our Jewish sisters and brothers in the Soviet Union. One day in the future, the prison doors will open up and our chains will all fall off. In the meantime, let's keep the faith and build an international movement to end anti-Semitism and racism throughout the world. As Abraham declared centuries ago, I'm a country preacher, so I have to quote some scripture. As Abraham declared centuries ago in Genesis 14 through 16, when he learned that his relative had been taken captive, Abraham called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan, unquote. Abraham's actions to liberate Lot and others from captivity was an early biblical example of taking a stand against unjust discrimination and imprisonment and captivity. I recall in the early 1960s when I worked as a young statewide youth coordinator in North Carolina for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As a result of this work, there was an unbreakable bond and solidarity between Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I also remember months before the historic and transformative March on Washington in August of 1963, Rabbi Heschel emphasized, quote, "Racism is man's greatest threat to humanity, the maximum of hatred for a minimum of reason," unquote. Rabbi Heschel condemned racism as a moral and theological evil that linked Black and Jewish struggles for righteousness, justice, freedom, and equality. In a speech to the American Jewish Congress in 1965 in New York, 3 years before Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. King proclaimed, quote, "The Negroes are not the only people who have suffered. The Jews went through the horrors of oppression, and more than any other people, the Jewish people understand the depths of tragic suffering. And it has been the Jewish people who have stood beside us in the struggle for freedom," unquote, from Dr. King. Both Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel worked closely together to fight against anti-Semitism and racism. Today, our brother Anatoly, we have to strive. I'm saying that Anatoly and I have to strive together to continue to work to speak out together from our prison cells, and to one day march together, and eventually to triumph together over the evil forces of anti-Semitism and racism in the Soviet Union, in America, and throughout the world. In closing, my faith enables me to be optimistic and not pessimistic. Both of us are refusing to serve time, but we are making time serve the worldwide freedom movement and together to affirm the oneness of our humanity. Please forgive the length of this letter. Writing to you is therapeutic and a special blessing from God. I pray, Anatoly, that the prison authorities there will permit you to receive this letter. God bless you. The struggle continues. A lucha continua. Sincerely, Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I think that's my keynote speech.
Great. Great. Well, when Charles giving his compliments about historical, I always feel ironic about it, dismiss it, but that's really historic. I never received a letter 50 years later. I knew from you that you wrote in a letter, but I never heard. Of course I did. There are people until this day who meet me and say, oh, you know that when I was in school, we wrote letters to you. Did you receive our letters from Toronto? And I always tell them, frankly, that I didn't receive any letters in prison. But KGB received, and that was important because KGB knew that the world cares, and that's what saved us. So the fact that that's probably immediately after my last speech in the court, and the sentence after this, you wrote like a month later, that the KGB knew that not only President Carter made the statement, and not only some politicians, but Jews of all the world and our strong supporters, that's very important. So first of all, thank you. And really, I never received a letter 50 years later, so it's good. Second, look, I have to say that when I asked for the title A Tale of Two Movements, I meant to speak, and I will be speaking about comparing the movement or struggle for Soviet Jewry and today's anti-Semitism.
Hold it up a little closer.
Yeah. So I'll go to this, but because of Benjamin's surprise, I want to say that really these movements were very close, and that in 1975, I met Jack Greenberg, who was the lawyer of Martin Luther King and who won a lot of cases on human rights. And he came to Moscow as a tourist, of course. They couldn't come differently. Together with Judge Diamond Keith from Detroit, who later became the Supreme Court of Labor in America, and who was the representative of African American community. And they were telling these stories about busing in Atlanta and how they were marching, and it was so important for us. And so many people joined this movement straight from the human rights movement. And I already was wearing this cap, which I was told it's the soldiers of Israel, in Israel have it. And Diamond said that he likes my hat, so I gave it to him. I hope they'll get another from Israel. And 10 years later, when I served 9 years in prison, then even 11 years later, and then came to Detroit, we had a picture with this hat, because he said that he was saving it because it was reminding him that the struggle for human rights is not finished, that it continues. So really, it was a lot of sympathy and a lot of mutual effort in our struggles. Now, coming to the topic that I wanted to to discuss, because I'm sure for this, by the way, the good thing is there is good news and bad news. Good news is that the number of the participants in this seminar goes up every year. The bad news is the number of anti-Semites goes much quicker, exponential, yeah. So we really, and the only way we can stop it is to make sure that not only new anti-Semitic courses, in every university, every year there are new anti-Semitic courses. And believe me, I was practically 100 universities. Since the war started, I was 9 times in universities. And I know how awful it is. And that's why it is so important that there will be courses on anti-Semitism in the universities. Because in fact, people are thirsty to hear the other side, the truth. And they almost were deprived of this. So that's why the seminars are important. Now, you heard a lot about our external challenges in our struggle against anti-Semitism. I want to speak a little bit about internal challenges for us. So there were many movements in which Jews, American Jews, were involved, but only twice they really came in big numbers, in hundreds of thousands, to Washington, and that's one about Soviet Jewry, one about anti-Semitism. So the first demonstration was on the 7th of December 1987. 250,000 Jews came to Washington the day when Gorbachev, the Soviet leader, came there to make a statement. And I, of course, felt personal satisfaction because the moment I went out of the prison a year before, I was speaking that hundreds of thousands of American Jews have to come when Gorbachev will come. I was the first political prisoner released by Gorbachev, but there was still a lot to do. And many Jewish leaders were very skeptical. They were saying, in winter, hundreds of thousands Jews, what you're talking about, maybe 10, maybe 15,000. And during the detente, is it good to retain the Soviet leaders, whether Reagan will be happy? In the end, when you go to the grassroots, you see, everybody wanted, because it was like 25 years of the struggle. They were struggling when they were young, and now they continue to struggle. The 25 years they were going to the Soviet Union as tourists to bring us information, take from us information. They were demonstrating, they were twinning bar mitzvahs, they were lobbying vis-a-vis practically every American president. And now everybody feels that is the last battle, because Gorbachev is already retreating. And so they came with a lot of enthusiasm. And in fact, they were right, because a year later, all the refusings were out. 2 years later, Berlin Wall fell. 4 years later, Soviet Union stopped existing, and 1 million Jews moved to Israel, and another 500,000 to America. But we didn't know yet. But we felt that that is the moment, the last act of the struggle. Now we can read archives of White House. And so now you can read how next day Gorbachev came in the town, that's Sunday. On the Monday become official negotiations. And President Reagan starts from this. He says, Mr. President, Mr. Gorbachev, I don't remember his title, was still, I think, Secretary of the Communist Party, General Secretary. So, of course, we'll go to our agenda. We have a lot of important questions. But first, I want to tell you, if you notice, hundreds of thousands, there were 250,000 Jews who were demonstrating yesterday, and you see it as a very important issue. And Gorbachev said, yeah, we took it, we noticed, we took it into account. So he really responded as a new type of the leader, that we are going to do something. But then he went back to the classical role of Soviets and said, but you also have your violations of human rights. Don't you have sometimes anti-Semitic incidents? Well, for Reagan it was very easy to dismiss it. Everybody who has complaints can go to the court. We are a free country and so on. The irony is that who could then say, who could see the future and say that the next big demonstration of American Jews here in the mall, exactly with the same number, 250,000, will be in 2023. And it all will be about anti-Semitism in America. So that is the irony. That then it was like a stupid Soviet joke that, well, we have our problems not letting Soviet Jews go, but you also can have problems. And of course, President Reagan easily dismissed it. But really, the next time that hundreds of thousands of American Jews came, they came because of the anti-Semitism, because of what's happening in the university. Because the biggest pogrom in modern Jewish history was welcomed in universities at the beginning of liberation, and so on. And so it is so natural for American Jews to repeat the success of Soviet Jewry movement. And I hear again, there are seminars about it. Why can't we unite in the same way and to fight in the same way and to lobby in the same way and to teach in the same way as we did with Soviet Jewry? Because it's, in both cases, it's like takes us back to history, takes us back to our identity, to the feeling of solidarity, and we feel that we are speaking about the future of our people, and we build relations with many friends. Why we cannot do it now? So I'll give 3 reasons which make it different. Yeah? You didn't hear me start from the beginning?
Yeah.
No, we got it.
Yeah. You also got it there? Yeah, okay. First is, it was very clear, it was very easy to define the aim of the war. Here is totalitarian empire, who's keeping the people in prison. There is a real iron curtain. And we have to destroy this iron curtain. And that was our desire in the Soviet Union, and that was the desire of those who supported us. It is much more, and there were many, many organizations. I didn't say it, but there were many organizations which disagree with one another, fought one another, Conference on Soviet Jewry, Council on Soviet Jewry, Coalition on Soviet Jewry, Student Struggle on Soviet Jewry. There were many different organizations who didn't like one another. It's Jewish after all. But they all could agree about the aim, and that's why they acted together. With anti-Semitism, we cannot even agree on the formula. It's so difficult for many people to accept that anti-Zionism, but Martin Luther King, by the way, accepted immediately, that anti-Zionism, in the end, at least in some of its forms, turns into anti-Semitism. I proposed 20 years ago 3D principle: demonization, delegitimization, double standard. What makes connection between these two? Later, the international definition, IRA definition, made it in the form of examples. But everybody who wants to see this connection can see it. And there is international definition. You know how many groups, Jewish groups, say that they cannot accept it because it will restrict the freedom of speech. It was really funny almost. At the day when America signed with Bahrain agreement to fight anti-Semitism based on the international formula, when they got this information from the State Department, at that very day, one of the respectable San Francisco Jewish organizations made decision that we cannot accept international definition because it can restrict the freedom of speech. So the moment you cannot agree what you're fighting for, there is almost no opportunity to work together. I'll give you one example from the Soviet Jewry. There were many conflicts and many debates. One of them, which is appropriate for this, was where these Jews who get permission should go, to Israel or to any other place. And the thing is that then there was no way, there was no freedom of migration, only reunification of families. So the only thing is through so-called reunification of families in Israel. And so people went to Vienna because there were no diplomatic relations. And on their way, there were American organizations who were saying, maybe you want to come to America. And if they say yes, they were taken. Israel was furious about it because Israel did so much. Israel was keeping contact when nobody could in the worst years. We organized, orchestrated all the campaign. I'm sure that when Charles went to Soviet Union, somebody from Israel was talking to him and was preparing him. So Israel, And here, this diaspora is stealing Jews from us. That was, on the other hand, there were people like me who were Zionists, but we were saying there is freedom of choice. And there were organizations who were insisting on Zionists, there were organizations who were insisting on freedom of choice. And at some moment, they were decisions, we so much disagree, maybe everybody will fight for this and for this. And what happened? It became clear immediately. If you take Shalach et Ami, let my people go from this, if you take this historical feeling that we are fighting for new exodus, you're taking away all the passion. On the other hand, if you're taking away this human rights aspect, you're losing opportunity to unite our forces with all the world. And so it was decided, in fact, that, okay, we disagree, but we are fighting together to break the Iron Curtain. Then we will start debating with one another. The same type of agreement theoretically could be here, but you cannot fight anti-Semitism in one form and not to fight in the other, because it will move immediately from one form to the other. You have to unite your forces and to fight together based on one definition. So that's first reason why it is so difficult. Second reason, for everybody with different organizations, it was clear what is the reason, who has to be blamed. That it is Soviet Union's totalitarian nature, monopoly on the controlling the life of the people, who have to be blamed. Here, what we have today, and some people don't realize to what extent it's divided. There are, well, from the times of Herzl was genius. He predicted the Israel state, but he also said that the moment, is it better, that the moment all the Jews will be in Israel, there will be no anti-Semitism. Why there should be anti-Semitism? Or they come to Israel, or they assimilate, there will be no anti-Semitism. And so, well, of course, everybody knows it's not true, but I have to say, and I was in the government, and the moment there is another anti-Semitic accident, or somewhere in France, or whatever, immediately the voices. But why they are there? We have anti-Semitism because they're there. If they'll come to Israel, there'll be no anti-Semitism. On the other hand, we have a lot of Jews in diaspora who are saying anti-Semitism because of the policy of Israel government. If only Israel government didn't do this or didn't do this, there would be no anti-Semitism, or at least there would be much less anti-Semitism. There are Jews who believe that Haredi, ultra-Orthodox Jews, are irritating people so much that they are the source of anti-Semitism. There are very religious people who believe that Reformed are trying to enter by force non-Jewish vote so strong that that's what happened in Germany. That's why Germans became so irritated. And of course, political. There are people on the left who strongly believe that it is because of the right, and people on the right who strongly believe that it's people on the left. Maybe you remember this debate between Biden and Trump, I think in the previous campaign, where on TV debate, one was saying that all the anti-Semitism on the right, and it's because of these Proud Boys. And the other was saying, no, all the anti-Semitism on the left, because Antifa. And so the fight with anti-Semitism turns into the fight of left against right. So I have to, you understand, I'm Zionist, so I don't want Jews to live in Israel. And I have a lot of disagreements sometimes with my government, so I can agree with some of the criticism. But the reason for anti-Semitism is the longest existing hatred towards Jews in the times of antique times, in Christian times, in National Socialist times, in Bolshevik times, everywhere. And to bring it down, disagreements political or about better identity, it's to make it much smaller and to make it absolutely impossible to unite our efforts. So what's really happening? That the left is fighting anti-Semitism on the right, which they have no influence on the right, because that's like electoral campaign. And the right is fighting anti-Semitism on the left. In Soviet Jewry movement, it was absolutely opposite. We had very strong Jewish lobby in Democratic Party who were dealing with Carter and who were pushing that he will fight for the freedom of prisoners. And we had very strong Jewish lobby in the right, who was pressing on Nixon in order he will agree with Jackson Amendment, which was a proposal by Democrat Jackson, and it was important for us. So everybody was fighting in their own camp, and that's why it was effective. And that's something that almost doesn't exist. And today when we find out, well, when the woke was indeed such a big danger, the only people who were fighting anti-Semitism in the woke were people on the right. Now that we can see how anti-Semitism on the right becomes threat again, but mainly you can see it, hear it all the time on the left. So that is another reason why it is so difficult. And the third, well, there are maybe other reasons, but I'll make the thing. The third is that in those days, there was a love story between our movement and human rights movement. Real love story. Well, yes. Thank you for your letter, but we had this love and cooperation all the time. Today, so-called human rights movement is in love story with anti-Semitism. And I'll give one example how it happened. You know, Human Rights Watch, yeah? Problematic organization, for us, very problematic. How it was created? In 1976, we, Soviet dissidents, created Helsinki Watch. In 1975, it was Helsinki Agreement. 1976, we, all types of dissidents, Jewish dissidents, Ukrainian dissidents, Armenian dissidents, human rights activists. My teacher, Andrei Sakharov, was human rights in general. We were in 1911 people established Human Rights Watch. It was called Helsinki Watch. In 1 year we were all arrested, but it's changed the world. This time they were already committed. Our documents which were published about human rights became the main documents by which the world judged Slavery. Bob Bernstein, the head of Random House, came as a tourist, like Charles, and met with us. And he met with us. I took him to Sakharov, who was very impressed. And when he went back to America, he created Helsinki Watch. Helsinki Watch, and the idea of this was to empower the voices of people who are fighting for freedom in dictatorship. They don't have their human rights, they don't have lawyers. The world doesn't know about them. And we have to amplify these voices. That was the idea. And it became a very respectable organization which fought for us dissidents in the Soviet Union, then for dissidents in China. 25 years ago, he was chairman and then honorary president. He resigned. He resigned because he said, now it's a very different organization. Now it's an organization which instead of amplifying voices of those who are in dictatorship, they're taking political stand on things. And the number of reports on, and it's changed its name from Helsinki Watch to Human Rights Watch. The number of reports on human rights violations in Israel is by far bigger than all the reports of Human Rights Watch on Syria and all the other dictators in that area. And so he resigned, because he said now it has nothing to do with the real struggle for human rights. But that's what happened in general. And because every Jew is proud of the struggle for human rights. Everybody wants to be connected with human rights. The fact that organizations speaking in the name of human rights are so much anti-Israel. In fact, by our criteria, double standard, it's anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic, that makes it much more difficult. So having said all this, I have to say that those organizations, those people who recognize that there must be one definition for all the types of Jewish identity, who recognize that we have to fight anti-Semitism in our own camp, first of all, and who recognize that we have to take the ban of human rights from the anti-Semites. And they can work together. And still it is, in fact, it is the majority of the organization of Jews. And then we together can have effective lobby in Washington, and we have effective demonstrations together, and we can have lectures in the universities, not in the name of left or right, but based on really principles of human rights, and that should be our aim. Thank you.
So, thank you both very much. So we have some time for Q&A. Does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Dr. Chavis and Natan Sharansky? Tish, can you
have such an
here, take that microphone.
Why did you have such a pristine letter for yourself because you sent him a letter in prison? How did that work?
Yeah. Well, first I had to sneak the letter out of prison because they were monitoring all of my letters. I'm sure that the letter to Natan was probably stopped by the KGB and the CIA. All my letters to Angela Davis never made their way out of the prison. So, you know, when my family visited, I gave them the letter. I don't want to break rules, but I needed to get the letter out of the prison. And that's how it wound up, the original in the box. Because I always, in prison, make 2 copies of everything, you know. That was my diary. I want to say something about Helsinki, human rights. While I was at McCain State Prison, I also wrote an appeal to Helsinki. And you're right, Helsinki at the time was an international agreement to define and to defend human rights for all people. But over the years, some of the organizations that claim to be human rights organizations, as you said, Natan, became political. And now some of those organizations are the biggest critics of not only Israel, but they're critics of certain African nations. You know, I think criticism is very important if it leads to something productive. But criticism for just the sake of being a critic, I think is dysfunctional and non-productive. So what I'm hoping is that we need to broaden the Refuse-Nick movement. We need to broaden and we need to take the human rights movement out of the hands of those who really are causing more confusion than there are clarity. So that's my limited response.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony?
Thank you both for an amazing talk that I'm sure most of us will remember for the rest of our lives. One question I have is, when we're engaging activism and we face people on our side of the aisle, as Natan spoke about, who for maybe very genuinely held reasons, even if they're misguided, disagree with us and with coalescing around a definition, for instance, for reasons of strategy. How do you think we should try and get through to them based on your experience? And I'm sure the civil rights movement had similar problems. So I'd love to hear just if there's any anecdotes you have from your extensive experience on that.
Well, my experience was different because we were facing totalitarian regime. So we didn't have really people who were arguing with us. People who were using the power of the state to disagree with us and to put us in prison. That's why we had to appeal to the people abroad. And that was like my role, to connect our voice with the people abroad. And of course, sometimes to bring a letter to Senator Jackson from Soviet Union, from 100 refuseniks, takes months, first of all, to collect 100 signatures secretly. and then that some of the tourists should smuggle it. And only then, through Voice of America, you could hear that Senator Jackson received it. So we really didn't have the argument with people inside Soviet, but we did have a lot of discussions and some arguments with those who were coming, because they were coming from different organizations. Look, you have to use all the reasonable arguments about definition. You have to know how to show that it's not restricting the freedom of speech. I can tell you with my students, I was saying, okay, think about something that you really hate in Israeli politics. And now try to express it, your disagreement, without demonization of Israel, without denial of the right of Israel to exist, and without applying double standards which you are not applying to any other country. And you know what? They made a big effort and they usually succeeded. So you can say the same criticism without delegitimizing Israel. By this you are proving that there is no restriction of the freedom of speech. Simply, here are the borders. When you are crossing these borders, you are anti-Semite. So with the friends or with the rational opponents, you have to use logic. There is no. But you have also to understand that here today, with the struggle against Israel, there are many ideological enemies, and who really believe that we are oppressors and they are oppressed, and so we should have no voice, and they should have all the. It's Bolshevism in its pure expression. Simply, you replace the word class with the word race, and you get exactly Bolshevism translated into what we want today. So with those who are ideological enemies, you have to fight through fighting for public opinion. But yeah, first of all, you have, and I saw it again and again, there are many people who are confused, who feel, no, we are really for the better world, for human rights, so we cannot be with you. And you have to know how to show it, that you're wrong.
I agree with what Natan just said.
Good answer.
Long letter and short answer.
So go on.
So thank you first of all for this very important talk. It was very touching. Within the cultural DNA of African Americans, there's the notion of justice for all. And within the cultural DNA of Jews, there's tikkun olam. So I'm wondering, when you talk about reclaiming the banner of human rights, beyond the UN, beyond lobbying the political establishment, what does that look like on the interpersonal level, reclaiming that alliance between communities?
Thank you, that's very important. Timely question. I believe in Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he presented this concept of the beloved community, which is inclusive of all humanity. I think the way you reclaim human rights, the way you reclaim the inner commitment of the African American community and the Jewish community is you don't start at the top of these international organizations. You build it at the community level. One of the things that we're finding out with the Black Jewish Action Alliance, there are a lot of good people in all these cities, but they are working in isolation of the community. And what we're trying to do is to form a network of local groups who believe not only in the importance of solidarity between blacks and Jews, but helping us. I think one of the things Natan said, you have to be clear definitively of what we're doing. I think you, early in this seminar, I said, the antidote to hate is love. Okay, so how do we love one another? How do we respect one another? How do we claim and defend even the oneness of our humanity? I see everybody here as part of one human family. In my view, there's only one race. That's the human race. In fact, race itself, as you heard me say in other settings, was a concoction. You know, there's no scientific, and I would say no theological justification for racial categories. You know, if you believe in the oneness of humanity, that means we're all part of one human family. You don't start with asking a person, well, what is your race, what is your skin color, what is your language, where were you born, and where are you now? If you start there with the divisiveness, then it prevents us from finding ways how to love one another. That doesn't mean you have to give up your identity. That does not mean you have to give up your beliefs. But I think that we need to rebuild, I would say, a worldwide, not just in America, not just in Israel, but a worldwide movement. I think one of the great characteristics of this Summer Institute has been its diversity from all over the world. You know, and I think that's so important because if you read the mainstream media, you would think that the whole world is against Israel, or the whole world is against the empowerment of people of color because of their skin color. And I think those fears and those phobias and those stereotypes are out there, but we overcome those stereotypes, we overcome those stigmas by exhibiting not only what we say, but what we do together, how we live together, how we work together, how we march together. The March on Washington in 1963 would not have been possible without support of the Jewish community. Most people don't know that the NAACP was initially started by Jews and blacks. You know, so we have to learn our history. I think one of the last point, what prevents what you're calling for is that we live in a world that has become ahistorical. We live in a world that has become residents about looking at the past. I think we should learn from the past. But I don't believe we should ever ignore the past. And one of the reasons that gives rise to anti-Semitism today is the failure of history, the failure of the understanding of the depths of Nazism, the depths of anti-Semitism. And I'll even go back to biblical times. You know, I think that we need to do a lot of work. That's why interdisciplinary studies are so important. No one discipline is going to solve this matter. So I'm calling on whether you're in the applied science world or the social science world, we ought to be working together to build the beloved community, to build a oneness of humanity, human rights movement.
No, I agree fully. Also, one interesting fact, because of Martin Luther King's march on Washington, there had to be a lot of preparations in Washington. The headquarters of this march were in the center of the Reformed Jewish movement.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. It was really great. I was wondering specifically about the accusations and libels of genocide and apartheid, and I wanted to ask you, why do you think it became acceptable to level these accusations against Israel, and how would you combat those specifically, because they're quite extreme?
Well, again, it's not innocent. It's not the accusation apartheid, very serious one, started or became legitimate in 2001 on the Durban conference. It was the first conference of United Nations against racism, and it was prepared for 3 years. In fact, it was Irvin Kotler, who was also, by the way, my lawyer, not officially. Officially, I had no lawyers, but he was my lawyer when I was in prison. Irvin Kotler was warning us. He said he had access to all this. He said that something which is prepared now in United Nations has nothing to do with racism. It's all against Israel. And really, when finally this conference in Durban was, the only thing on which everybody agreed, not everybody, no, but people agreed, and there were resolutions that now that the apartheid of South Africa is finished, the next country which is country of apartheid is Israel. And that's when this legitimate accusation of apartheid, which of course is nonsense. We 20% of our population are Arabs who live together with us, who are working together with us. And I think there are more Arabs in our universities than in any Arab country in the world. So it's ridiculous by definition. But what they're saying Well, it's only formal definition, but in fact, the same about genocide. When Human Rights Watch accused of genocide, and we said, what you are talking about? It was also like 10 years ago. They said, technically it's not genocide, because by formula which was presented, by the way, by the Jews in the end of the Second World War, what is genocide? The word they invented that. Lunkin, professor for Poland. So they said technically it's not genocide. But if you look in all these years, what's happening, that we call it genocide. So they call it. It means that 10 people call it genocide, and then it becomes like legitimate. They make different definition of the word genocide, which existed from Nuremberg trial, which meant extermination of the people as people. And they say, of course, technically it's not, but we see it as it is. So we really have to unmask it and show. Even today, it's of course it's awful reality there in Gaza, but they came to us on the 7th of October without making secret. They are killing and raping and killing and raping and burning alive. And so everybody that they saw, because that was their aim. We are trying to target terrorists, unfortunately, who are using the population as a shield. So, what is genocide? Again, take the definition of genocide, it's not genocide. But you say, but we feel it like genocide. Okay, you feel it, keep it for yourself. Don't make the world believe in it. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think it's contemporarily interesting that a lot of the people who claim to be against apartheid now were utterly silent when apartheid was in South Africa. So why are they speaking out now? Because they're using the misdefinition of apartheid for political reasons. And it really is a sort of a slap in the face to native South Africans who lived through the horror of real apartheid, for people to be throwing around the term now as if it can apply easily to the situation in the Middle East. So I think that's why I firmly believe that part of what we have to do in the academy, part of what we have to do in the colleges and universities, is to make sure that we have accurate history, make sure we have accurate definitions, to make sure that we raise up a generation of young people who are hungry and thirsty for the truth, but now who are hungry and thirsty for the misinformation and disinformation that's out there.
By the way, about genocide, there does exist genocide today. What is happening with Uyghurs in China, that's genocide. They want to destroy all the people. What is happening in Eritrea, like the whole tribes, are eliminated. Try to organize in the university, they tried and failed, the demonstration against genocide in China. And, with Chinese students, try to organize with Muslim students, or demonstration against elimination of Muslims in Sudan. And you will not be able to do it. So that's also something to think about.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis and Mr. Sharansky, first of all, thank you for your words tonight, and thank you for your lifetime of service to the cause of justice for our respective communities and for the world. Dr. Chavis, if you will allow me, I just want to go back to what I believe to be some prophetic words in your letter. One day in the future, the prison doors will open up and the chains will all fall off. In the meantime, let's keep the faith and build an international movement to end anti-Semitism and racism throughout the world. Well, now that the future is the present and you are sitting next to one another, how do you envision this collaborative partnership to end racism and anti-Semitism throughout the world materializing?
Thank you. Well, first, it feels much better for the change to be falling off. When I think about my prison days, and I'm sure Natan, when he thinks about his time of incarceration, we have to focus on what can we extract out of an experience that would be helpful to others. I would not recommend anybody seeking to go to prison to strengthen their faith or to prove that their ideology is correct. There are other ways to do that. However, I think that the courage that was exemplified and is still being exemplified by Natan and others, and by some of my colleagues who are working to free other political prisoners around the world, I think, what is the source of our inspiration? And I think, first of all, thank you, Professor. I think we have to do a more consistent job in our universities and colleges to envision how we shape a better future. I think if our analysis is circumscribed only to deal with the current contradictions or deficits or whatever, that may be happening, then I think that it thwarts the how people become hopeful, how people become faithful. When I wrote the letter, I really believed, and the letter came true, that the prison doors were going to open and the chains were going to fall off. But in the meantime, we have to struggle. We have to keep the faith. And so I know a lot of times it can become depressing. It can become worrisome. With the rise of anti-Semitism, there are some people who believe that it's gotten so big it can't be challenged. I disagree with that notion. To me, we can build a movement around the world larger than the movement we had in the 1960s or the 1970s or the 1980s or the 1990s. And I think that we all should be contemplating how we all can work together, not only in the university settings, but in the communities that surround these colleges and universities. So that's what gives me my hope today. That's what reinforces my faith today. And as a result of this conference, I realize now I got to go learn a little Yiddish and a little Hebrew.
Yeah, simply, well, of course, I agree with everything. I want to say prison is a good place to become, really, to respect the human rights of every nation. So when we were running for Knesset first time, we created Party of New Immigrants. Our slogan was, we are different type of the party. We go to prison first. And I have to give you another example. I received a year and a half ago letter from Russian prison from Alexei Navalny, who later was killed by Putin. And Alexei Navalny, who started like 15 years before as a nationalist, as a Russian nationalist, and against the government, which is depriving people of human rights, but really believing in Russian nationalism. And then with the time, the struggle against all this corrupt regime and so on, he became more and more open to the needs of other nationalities and to Jews. And then he is writing me from prison. Well, the regime is very bad now, but there are still some differences. First of all, political prisoners have a lawyer, and secondly, he could write me a letter from the prison, which reached me. And he was writing that he is reading my book, and that he is surprised how much conditions then and now are similar. And he is using the between the phrases from our Exodus, from the Bible, and he promises that that in the end the Russian people will fight together with Jewish people for the better world. Well, he was killed by Putin like a year after this, but you can see how this atmosphere of the struggle and then imprisonment, how it makes people to feel much broader, much more solidarity with all the world.
Thank you guys so much for really this historic conversation and opportunity. In a post-October 7th world right now, given the trials and tribulations that you guys have experienced in your own lives, and the fight that struggle that you had towards your own respective civil rights movements. What gives you both hope and challenges looking post-October 7th moving forward right now? And what do you task this audience who come from diverse backgrounds and diverse communities to come back with right now? What is the message you want to give people and the task that you want to empower them with?
Well, again, I will give you a very short answer. For me, October the 7th, 2023 was a reminder that we have so much work to do. And to me, we should be fighting more against anti-Semitism. Because October 7th will happen again. And again, and again, and again. If we don't strengthen our movement to get people to understand what is anti-Semitism, what is anti-Zionism. But to me, we have to also be clear not only what we are against, but what are we for? What do we live for? What do we stand for? What do we march for? In my short answer, in another letter I wrote from prison, was the oneness of our humanity. You know, I believe that we have to talk about it, we have to research about it, we have to use the science that we all, our DNA, everybody in here is 98% the same. So the question is, how do we find ways and means to work together? And then lastly, what gives me hope is my faith. Again, I didn't gain faith in prison. I took faith with me to prison, and I still have faith today. And interfaith dialogue is also very important, because the more I have interfaith dialogue, it doesn't weaken my faith, it strengthens my faith.
Well, as to conclusions, from the 7th of October and 8th of October, there are two different things. 7th of October, conclusion is very clear. You are not appeasing evil. You are not trying to build your terrorists who are loyal to you, and that's why it will bring you peace. If somebody is not making secret that they want to destroy you, you should better be the first to destroy them. And that's very simple. The illusions of 30 years ago, the illusions of 20 years ago, when our leaders were trying to appease the terrorists, and the illusions of 5 years ago, when $50 million every year from Qatar to Gaza was something that will make them more tolerant towards us. These were all the illusions. I always, for 30 years, I was against it, but we've finished. And Israel is fighting, and they, we understood that we have to fight also not only Hamas, but Hezbollah and Syria and Iran. We have no choice. We cannot continue like this. So that is the first conclusion, which has nothing to do with our discussion, but it has a lot to do to the determination of Israelis to fight to the end. My son-in-law, my son-in-law, was for 350 days on Miluim, on reserve, and his 5 kids, 5 boys, not 5 boys, lived with us because of this. And everybody felt that that should be like this. All our normal life stopped because we have to defeat our enemies who want to defeat us. And though it seems that there is a lot of disagreements in Israeli society, they are all political. On this issue, everybody agrees. The second is the conclusions of the 8th of October, which in some way was even more terrible. That on the 8th of October, after this absolutely awful, unprecedented killing and raping and torturing and cutting the bodies of parents in front of children and children in front of parents, when you think that all the world should feel strong solidarity, and by the way, they were not making secret of it, they were putting on the internet in order to frighten us. That there were 30 organizations, students' organization, Harvard, made a statement that that is the beginning of liberation. And so on, and you know the rest. So all our, let's say, for some years I was trying to explain that progressives are not liberals, that they're not our allies, and so on and so on. Suddenly it became clear. It was almost impossible to explain when there was like book of one of the members of our seminar that anti-Semitism in the woke movement, there was such an angry reaction of Jewish world. How you can, they are our brothers, they are fighting together. How you can explain them, accuse them in anti-Semitism? But the leaders of this movement and the universities are calling this pogrom the beginning of liberation movement, the last remnant of colonialism should be. That's how the liberation looks, they were saying. So there is no need to explain that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, that progressives are not our partners, that real liberalism is something very different. So, but that is the beginning of different struggle, where we have to use the fact that now it's much more clear who our real allies are, and build different types of coalitions.
Thank you so much, both doctors, Dr. Chavis and Dr. Honoris Causa Sharansky. I have a question not about global hate, but about internal hate, and this is to Dr. Sharansky. I'm Israeli. My first memory is the Yom Kippur War, and then my three things I remember are 77 Sadat, 86 Sharansky. When you landed in Israel, I remember watching it and crying as a teenager in Israel. And 95 Rabin, the assassination of Rabin. These are three memories I have very strongly in my mind as an Israeli. I would like to ask you about internal hate, about Kulturkampf. You came from Russia, from the Soviet Union. I don't know, I mean, probably you expected the promised land to be a land of, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit idealistic, but a land of people loving each other, etc. Whereas we are currently, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll be very happy to stand corrected. We are currently in a huge civil war within the Jewish community. I'm not talking about global hate. It's a Kulturkampf. It's a cultural war. My question to you is more personal. Are you sad? Are you disappointed? Are you disillusioned? Are you optimistic about Israel as a refuge for the Jewish people? I'm asking you as an Israeli, as somebody who grew up in Israel.
Well, when I came to Israel, you have to understand it was very dramatic. In the morning, I am in KGB prison. Then I'm taken on the airplane. I been brought to Germany. American ambassador takes me from Eastern Germany through the bridge to the Western Germany. Then I meet my wife, whom I didn't see 12 years, and we go to the Tel Aviv, on the small airplane to Tel Aviv. The door opens, she says, that is our Prime Minister Shimon Peres, that's our Foreign Minister, it's Shamir, and Chief Rabbis, and we all go to the Kotel and we celebrate it. So, and it's all in 18 or 16 hours. So it's straight from the hell to paradise. So when you are high in the skies, you can only go down. So now for 38 years I go down, and I still believe I'm in the paradise. Really, it's paradise which needs a lot of reparation, but it's paradise. And I don't think that Israel is a, shelter. It's not a shelter. If shelter there, you can maybe find in Miami too. It's a place where if you want to have a deeply Jewish life and free life, that is the best place to be. And that's why I'm against propaganda, Zionist propaganda. I am against restricting or making people to move. I'm for freedom. I think we have message strong enough, quality of life strong enough to attract people. Now, as to did I think that everybody loves everybody? Look, I was like spokesman. Spokesman was not underground spokesman. So I had to deal, not like other refugees, with different Jewish organizations who were all fighting for us but hated one another. And sometimes you have to understand that I had to, the same letter, let's say, which I brought, that the woman who I asked to deliver it is putting it in her underwear to take through the border and to bring to their organization. And I have to do it twice, to put two women under the risk, because they have to bring it to two different organizations which are on the same street in Manhattan, but which don't talk to one another. So, I didn't know how when we are saying two Jews, three opinions, or one Jew, two opinions. So we know what we are talking about. That it's our success is built deeply on our disagreements with one another. So I am not surprised. Of course, the fact that sometimes there are no restrictions, like with Rabin, it's huge tragedy, it's historical proportions. And but then now, today, we are in a situation when people are using the most awful language against the government, and there are many things that they disagree, but the fact that we permitted to go so far is not good. But at the same time, during this war, we see how people are in one tank fighting together with absolutely different political views. By the way, I tell to every reservist that I meet in the 30s years, go to politics. These are the people we need. We really have to replace our politicians because of different reasons. But at the same time, we see that deeply when it comes to feeling of the history, that we are people who are living in the history of the roots which we have. So there is very serious unity of our people. So, well, politics, unfortunately, and the Jewish politics, Israeli politics, is not a very safe place. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to show you that the Jewish people are not the only people that have division. You know, the question is, how can we find that space and place where our unity is more important than the division is? I'll be very honest, in my community, some don't believe. They ask me all the time, why are you working with the Jewish community? And I ask them all the time, why are you not working with the Jewish community? Because to me, I think that for me, solidarity is not a word. It's a lived experience. And the more we live and experience one another, our cultures, our religions, our faith, our destiny, it sees in our mutual interests, not only to defend one another, but to stand and help build a better world for all people. So to me, when the question was asked earlier, are you optimistic, pessimistic, or a word? I'm optimistic because I see in young people today, despite all of the division, I think that young people today have the capacity, if given the proper education, if given the proper motivation, will help one day end what we know as anti-Semitism, one day end what we know as racism. But it's going to take a struggle. It's going to, I think Natan and I would agree that we've made the progress that we've made thus far because of struggle. Progress did not fall out of the sky by osmosis. It came because somebody stood up, somebody spoke up, somebody organized, somebody sacrificed on behalf of making the world a better place. And so I get my optimism from seeing what is now happening in the diaspora of African people, seeing what's happening in the diaspora of Jewish people. And I think we need to, Charles, the more I think about it, we not only need a summer institute, we need a fall institute, a winter institute. You know, every season we need an institute because waiting 1 year, a lot can happen in 1 year. And I think this is consistency of struggle that we need.
So thank you. So I'm going to ask one final question, and we're running low on time. So I'm sitting next to two giants of human rights, and you both sacrificed a lot. You both gave a lot to the struggle for human decency, for your communities and for humanity. Natan, you spoke about the sacrifice that young Israelis made in the last 2 years. That should never be underestimated. I think it's profound. Gilad spoke about the divisions, and they exist, but as you said, the entire country came together and sacrificed in a profound way. So my question to you is, we live in a society and a time when I think people are predisposed to be a bit more individualistic. They spend a lot of time in social media, fragmented, even away from their families. Families are also in a different position than they were a generation ago. What's your message to young people, African Americans, Jews in the diaspora, at this time of an emergency, the explosion of anti-democratic values, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, racism? What's your message to young people? What are they obligated to sacrifice? If so, how can they contribute?
No, you start.
Thank you. As I mentioned, the reason why I'm optimistic is because of young people. It does not mean that everybody should desire to sacrifice the way other people have sacrificed. I think when someone sacrifices, you should learn from that sacrifice. And the more we learn from prior sacrifices, would mean that we don't have to repeat that sacrifice. I think we should understand the blessings of life. In my view, outweigh the difficulties of life. Charles knows and Tish knows, I'm always talking about these glasses. One is a clean glass, one is a dirty glass. If we only focus on the dirty glass, no one even know that the clean glass exists. So we have to certainly critique the clean glass and the dirty glass, but we have to also spend, I would say, even more energy on building, erecting, pointing to the clean glass so people have choices. And I think that as we affirm the blessedness of our lives, the blessedness of our culture, the blessedness of our histories, that in my view is very self-motivating, very self-inspirational. And the more we take time to talk to one another, to learn from one another, the more we find out not how different we are, but how similar we are. And it's that similarity, it is that relevance between us that I think gives impulse and buoyancy to the future. And that's what I always focus on.
Charlie was speaking about suffering. I have to say,
Sacrifice.
sacrifice. I never felt while in prison that I'm sacrificing. In fact, the most enjoyable part of my life is prison. And you understand, I spent many years in solitary confinement. I spent 405 days in the punishing cell. I spent 130 days in hunger strike. So it's not enjoyable, but it's so meaningful. It's the place where you know exactly where is clean glass and where is dirty glass. You know exactly where are your enemies and where are your friends. You have such a moral clarity. You know that you feel yourself very deeply in history. It's so easy to feel solidarity with people who lived thousands of years ago, or even the people who live in the literature. You really understand them. You feel it, the struggle. So you can never reach such moral clarity in politics when you're in the government. Never. So I would not speak about sacrifice. But I believe that all people want meaningful life. They want, of course, some are lucky go to prison. There they find meaningful life. But you cannot expect it from everybody. And meaningful. Well, we saw it now in Israel with all our things. At some moment when people see meaning in this defending Israel, how immediately they are mobilized. The number of volunteers is much bigger than the army needs. So, and when young people look for meaningful life, and that's what I'm saying. Oh, you want tikkun olam? If you don't want tikkun olam, you're not Jewish. If you're Jewish, you want tikkun olam, yeah? So, you want tikkun olam needs a lot of strength, a lot of energy. And you will not find this source of this energy without your roots, without your identity, and at the same time, without feeling how freedom is important. And I think that the moment people feel that, well, they all want meaning, but they feel that they can reach this meaningful life. So they're becoming much more loyal to the values that we're talking about.
Profoundly said, thank you. So, on behalf of everybody here, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, Dr. Sharansky, thank you so much for being here.
I'm only honored. So I can have a letter.
Yes,
I want to have a copy of it. Great, how you found it?
It was in the bottom of a, it was in the bottom of a box.
So somebody.
I'm sure the KBG has it.
Forget you for who?